All right, welcome everyone to a work session of the Mount Crested Butte Town Council. The topic for our work session this evening is special event ordinance. And we have Rebecca Gagne to lead us off.
Thank you, Nicholas. Good evening, council. This work session is coming to you guys based on comments that both our town attorney Klein and myself received from our previous work session regarding the special event permit ordinance. We have, Nick has created a draft ordinance for our review prior to the first reading, and then I additionally have presented two revised drafts of both the special event tiers and the special event permit application based on some feedback I was given by council. I'd like to get started first with the special event ordinance draft, so we can go through, just as a reminder that no action is being requested tonight. Just the sole purpose is to work through this ordinance and the updates to the tiers and application to make sure that everything is aligned where you would like to see it. So with that being said, I will let Nick kind of lead the special ordinance draft section of it, and then when we move on to the others, I will be happy to take over from there. So Nick, I will let you take away.
Hi, everyone. I see that Jerry is in person. I unfortunately could not make it, but hope everyone's doing okay. And I'm wondering what the food, if there was any food tonight.
No, tonight is just cheese and crackers and mushroom.
It was the first
Okay.
question, Nick.
Those cheese and crackers are pretty good. So, you know, we took the direction from the work session in December and formulated this draft ordinance. You'll see it's very simple. As we discussed, we were going to kind of rely on the guidelines adopted by the council later on down the road to more fully flesh out the program. This kind of just sets up a program, gives us some enforcement teeth and some more basic procedures around that. As you'll see, there's some items that still need to be filled in. For example, section 11-72, still need to figure out when an application needs to be due. That's kind of more of a Rebecca question, although we defer to whatever the council thinks is reasonable. It's my opinion, though, that this draft substantially reflects the direction from the council and the council's level of involvement that you all were looking to have in the special event permitting process. You'll notice that really the only involvement that the council has at this point is if there was a bad acting special event, and if that special event wants another permit in a subsequent year, then they would have to come to the council to get approval for that special event. That's all the way down at the bottom at 11-73 subsection D. Otherwise, the only other item I wanted to touch on is the liability questions that we had from last time. You'll recall that the one of the example ordinances that we had spoke to the ability of PD to shut down any special event and what kind of liability exposure we would have if we didn't shut down the special event for safety reasons. I spoke with Sam Light from Sursa, who I believe you all know from what he presented to you guys maybe a couple months ago now. And he said that he didn't really have any experience with that issue giving any municipality liability. He said he wouldn't worry about it because it's kind of implicit that the PD or fire can call any sort of public event for safety reasons, and that whether or not that determination is made on our end resides in our police powers, and if it's not made on our end, then it's just a question of whether or not the entity that's throwing the event would want to shut it down or not. So all to say, I didn't put any of that language in the ordinance that as it appeared in the example, just because it's kind of an implicit power that the town or the fire authority retains. The one item, though, that I will say will be changed from what appears in the packet is Sam stressed making it extremely clear in the code and not just in the adopted guidelines that primary insurance that's names the town as an additional insured for any event that occurs on town property needs to be included in the code, and that for any event that occurs on any portion of town property, the event thrower indemnifies the town. That's something that we can add between now and first reading, although it doesn't appear here. Otherwise, I'll kind of end my spiel for now and toss it back to Rebecca or if anyone on the council has questions.
Yeah, I guess, Nick, my first initial question related to what you just spoke about would just be, currently our special event permit application does require any event, whether it's on private or town-owned property, to hold that additionally insured, liability insurance with us additionally insured. Is there a way for that to be in the code, or would it only be, would we only be able to say town-owned property?
I think it can exist like that. It was just, I'm not sure how much we need it for non-town owned property. If it's, all on the ski, if it's all at the ski area, right? I'm not sure how much that is necessary, but certainly for town owned property, we need to include that.
So to repackage that, if I may, for the requirements for additionally insured coverage should be a part of any event that is on town property, but not necessary if it's on private property.
Yeah, and something that Sam brought up that I thought was an interesting example. He gave the example of maybe like a farmer's market that clears out part of a road and vendors are set up on that road, or maybe a concert series where some sort of stage is set up in a parking lot. Those were the examples that he gave of where maybe there's town property concerns that are not totally apparent in the application, but are, as it develops.
Yeah, I guess my concern would be that we have such limited property that we actually own. Most of these events are withheld on private property, but use things that town owns, like parking lots for their parking plans and stuff like that. And if they're labeling our parking lot as their parking plan and we approve that and something happens in the parking lot, would we be then requiring it because that's part of their plan?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, awesome.
Anything that implicates the use of our property.
If any part of an event utilizes town property, the town needs to be listed as additionally insured.
Yeah, I realize that I said hosted on town property, but really it's any.
And I think we should also have it be town owned or managed because of Snowmass Lot. Because we don't technically own Snowmass Lot, but that is a place that like people will put a concert or we'll put something like that. And we are the managing persons of that lot by
The
agreement.
Snowmass lot, we have a lease to use that lot for parking purposes. Well, you're probably familiar with it on some other stuff we've dealt with. We have a lease for that property.
Yep.
Strictly for parking, but for events, the owners have been very cooperative and granting permission for those types of events.
Yep.
So in that case, should it be the town or the owner that's listed as additionally insured?
Well, I think the town, I mean, to the
Yeah.
extent you've got any interest in property that's a part of the permitted activities or area, then we need to be an additional insured.
Yeah, whether or not we want to tag on the property owner to this, you know, if we have an interest.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And Nick, while we're on that private versus public, I did have one question about 11-71A. Where it says at the end here, for any event that falls within the special event guidelines, or sorry, where it says, to be conducted in whole or in part on any public street, sidewalk, or other property owned or controlled by the town. Does this allow us to say that if it's hosted on private property within the guidelines and tiers as well, or would we need to also?
Yeah, that's why I included that language, since it's just as expansive as possible in capturing what would be subject to this.
Roman?
Jerry used the phrasing that I was considering, which is any property the town has an interest in, rather than town owned, because that language would cover places like the Snowmax lot.
Yeah, you bet, by lease, yeah, exactly.
Would that cover us for TCCA managed areas, since we're part of the TCCA? Which is the base area?
Yeah, I mean, any property that we have an ownership interest in takes you to a lease,
Okay.
includes a lease. If there's some kind of management agreement that's short of the lease, then we can add own, you know, any property that the town has any ownership interest in or otherwise manages, something
Okay.
like that. Well, I mean, that, as Nick says, we want the most expansive language. And that covers it really.
Awesome.
Let's talk about, I think I understand your question on the TCCA. Let's talk about that with Jerry or Nick offline.
Okay.
And, because I think we
You
can
understand
figure that
this.
part out, and for the sake of this conversation, I think we can move on.
Okay. I have no further questions for Nick on this, council. Tiffany?
I've got one quick question. On this, I noticed it refers to the special event coordinator. I'm wondering if that should say town staff, town manager, town clerk. 'Cause I'm kind of picturing the code like 20 years down the road, and Rebecca's if she's no longer here. If we don't replace it, do we want it to say that still? Going back to our code currently still refers to a animal control officer. So I'm kind of like projecting down the road. I don't know what you guys think of that. Yeah.
It's a well taken point. I don't care. It's really a call for you all to decide. It could say any number of things, but I settled on special event coordinator because that's who we have right now, and that's who'd be administrating it. But we could certainly get creative with the language. We could say town clerk and or designee. I mean, there's a few ways we could go about it. We could even toss it back to the town manager or their designee. I mean, there's ways you can go about it. It's really whatever you want to do.
The usual typical language in the code is the zoning administrator, and then that's defined as the town manager or their designee. So
Okay.
it captures everybody that it might potentially be.
Awesome.
Not that you're not leaving us, but.
No, I know. I know, it's a good point. I have a couple notes that I'll get with Nick on the side about that are, you know, different, but that was one of them. I was
Thinking
like,
it
I'm
was
just
a lottery or something.
Yeah, this is true. I wouldn't leave you guys.
To go follow fish
I
around all
would
the
just
time. I
fish
think you
tour.
would.
Anything else? All right, thank you, Nick. Hearing nothing, let's move on to the next topic, which is our special event tiers draft 2. The basic updates here, as you'll see, is that we've added an additional tier so that there's now 4 tiers. So there is a distinction for those indoor events that we had discussed during our last work session that you'll see under tier 1 events. I've also decided to include the Mountain Wedding Garden, events at the Mountain Wedding Garden, since we as the town are the owners of that venue, and we contract with events and with organizers, and there's a whole different set of rules and applications that they go through. I view it more of something that we already have all of our bases covered for in that contracting. So I did include that for things like the summer solstice yoga festival that happens. We don't have a ton of events that happen that way, but it at least include that because we don't need double information from those people. The other kind of bigger change that I made was that I did make tier 3 a little bit more robust, adding in the need for a temporary road closure so that the summer GT falls under that, and it doesn't fall. It was the only local event that we incur that has a temporary road closure, and making them go those extra steps seemed unnecessary. They're not similar to a Whatever USA or an X Games type style event where we really wanted to leave tier 4 being. So those were the major changes that I made amongst this. And then I also updated the maximum attendance for both tier 0 and tier 1 based on information that was given to me by CBMR and Elevation Hotels for their max capacities in their venues. The one thing I struggled with on the tier 1 event, as you'll see, I have an asterisk next to the Living Journeys Gala because it was brought to my attention that a portion of it is outside on Jose's deck. And so I'm just looking for some guidance as to, and I don't know if this is guidance coming from Nick or from you guys, but guidance on how we can include that as part of the property and venue, even though it's not indoor, or do we want to consider it outdoor and not within an indoor venue, and have them be bumped up to that tier 2. So that's really where I wanted to get a major pulse from you guys tonight.
So what is the thought between indoor and outdoor? So if it's like, let's say the Elevation wanted to have an employee party. Part of it's gonna be outside on the deck. It's all private. I know I'm mixing some things in here, but
If it's private, it would fall under tier 0.
tier 0, okay,
And it wouldn't matter if it's in or out.
okay.
So it's more of like the instance, like your GVC 3 Summit, they did a portion of their event outdoor on the deck. But they didn't extend the deck like March Meltdown does and turn on optional premise license. They didn't have amplified music, even though that's a little gray area now because we're moving to that different terms of it being between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. now, but it wasn't a huge impact. The other thing about like this, like it being encompassed within a venue, and like an established venue, not a pop-up venue like Red Lady Lawn where you're turning on an optional premise license. It just seems like it's part of that building. To me, it's not like those events, everybody's parking at the Elevation for the majority of it, right? Or taking the bus. There's no huge impact on town resources in that respect. There's no concert outside with it in that respect. So it just seemed like it didn't really fit in that tier 2, but that was like the one thing that was stopping it from being in the tier 1.
Well, while folks are thinking about that, kind of where I got off on that is, under the tier 0, and I know it's just an example for our benefit, but, wedding or private parties at private residences, couldn't it also be a private party at a private business, kind of like the example I just gave you?
Yeah, it's just, these are examples and there's more examples for
Totally.
sure.
But essentially, anything that's truly private,
Private.
so if Treasury Liquors wanted to have a staff party in their building and they didn't go outside the building, then that would be
Yep.
tier 0.
I mean, they could go outside their building as long as they're on their property.
No, I was just.
or on approved property beyond.
Yeah, understood.
I see the possible conclusion, though. Like, it does just call out, but that's just examples.
Those examples will not be
Right.
on our tiers.
Yeah.
These are
Okay.
just for you to understand
Thank
where
you.
these fall.
Cool.
This won't be published on our.
Great.
I mean, it's obviously published in our packet, but this is for you guys, not for,
So it'll be published in the application packet for reference?
no.
No. So nowhere do people have an example if they're trying to wrap their heads around what that might look like?
No, but they can reach out to the event coordinator at the town if they have any question about what tier they fall under. All of these examples as well, were previous, well, not tier 0, obviously, because they didn't apply, but all the other ones, as you'll see, they say 2024 SEPA tiers, and so these were all applications the town received last year that I've broken into where they would fall into these tiers. And 95% of these organizers were either at the luncheon or have received the email. Actually, 100% of them have received the email that they've seen where they fall in this new system. And so any old past applicants we're in communication with, and they'll understand where they are. Any thoughts? I don't mind for the ease of things, keeping those things that extend to the patio under tier 2, but if there was a way to verbalize it or make it in there, I just didn't know how to make that.
And then you're talking about the indoor outdoor.
Mhm. Yeah, because it would be the same as if, Adaptive throws a party on their deck.
Yeah.
Right.
Christmas party had.
Well, oh, do they go outside?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like that, so I was gonna say that, but I didn't think they would go outside, but that's a perfect example, like, it's an invite public thing. But it's contained in their building, they just happen to be outside on their deck.
So what's the intent of escalating it to tier 2 just because they go outside?
And that's kind of how I feel about
Yeah.
the use of Jose's deck for an event
Yeah.
that's being held within elevation. That doesn't meet the turning on an optional premise license. Or using a special event liquor permit, or, bringing in more than 400 people. And so it's really that indoor word that. And
I think if that was taken out, I would be really confused as to which tier I should apply to. If I was an event applying for the first time. Because there's a lot of overlap between 1 and 2. And I wouldn't know what's literally what's the point? You know, what is it going to mean to me if I'm a tier 1?
you don't have to apply as a tier 1.
Or so exactly, yeah, so.
And so there's the, and so I guess to further point on that, another difference between tier 1 and tier 2 is the liquor permitting aspect of it. And that's really where that falls, is when they need to be applying, so that we know that we have all of the permits that are needed outside of the special event permit before we approve it. But when it's contained within something like elevation, it's their liquor license, it's their property.
The other thing that I see as the difference between the two is like the inclusion of music. So I'm just trying to understand if that's the intent between the delineators. And between town wanting to manage one more than the other are things like music and is going outside, something that town really wants to like have more of a handhold over. is, having a liquor, being issued a liquor license, that would make sense, but that like being on their own patio, is that something that?
Well, and that's why we've changed it to be 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. rather than just if you have amplified music, because it's only when it would be against the DDA guidelines for noise.
Well, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., that's like all day, isn't that all? day?
Outside of the hours of 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. So from
Okay.
10 p.m. to 7 a.m. if it's between those
Okay.
hours, and we can change the verbiage of that if that's confusing, but. It would just be like late night music. And the only example we really have of that of past applicants would be Winter GT, who does music and announcements at midnight.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know if we really need to have an event at Jose's that spills out onto the deck, apply for an application. I don't see the,
To me, it's.
Right, I mean, to me, it doesn't either. I agree with both of you on that. And so that's why I am trying to look for verbiage for tier 1 that says that rather than completely indoors.
Seems like a great question.
Yeah, and that's why I said.
Yeah,
please say.
I mean, just reading it, how it's written, it's whether or not the event is held completely indoors. So where is the actual event being held? If there's some spillover, out onto the deck, that's just spillover. I mean, it's, the true nature of the event. Where is that being held?
Sorry, it's more of a situation, Nick, where let's take the gala, for instance, I think they started on Jose's deck for a cocktail. And the deck was closed to the event, and then they moved downstairs to the gala. And then opposite for the GVC climate, they had their climate thing down in the ballroom, and then we all went upstairs for hors d'oeuvres and cocktails on the deck after. And so that's where we're trying to or with adaptive, where they have that holiday party and may have an activation out on the.
Then maybe it's just as simple as saying the event is primarily held completely indoors. So there's some wiggle room there.
do you just say entirely on private property? Like entirely because Jose's is all, the deck and the inside of Jose's is all Jose's. So,
What about referring to the liquor license? So their liquor license encompasses that deck, then that would cover it.
Yeah.
Includes the deck, yeah.
Would
Yeah.
that open us to, though, if they turn their optional premise liquor license on, would that encompass in that, or can we still have?
I frankly would I like my suggestion. I may be biased, but I think I think it just keeps us the most options open, right? I mean, if the event is primarily held completely indoors, that means that the main focus of the event is indoors. Sure, there's some things that are happening outside, but the question is, what are people traveling for, right? I think that language keeps us open to that question being the guiding question.
Rebecca, finish your thought on the completely private part of it though. Why did you think that's problematic? Like what Valita suggested?
Because private property could insinuate Red Lady Lawn as well, but I don't know. And the main reason for the need to know about those Red Lady Lawn events is generally because they're large and they don't always have a liquor license on them, but they will affect the other businesses within the base area. And we want to make sure that due diligence has been had, that everybody is aware that the base area is about to get 400 people, 500 people into it, so that our PD is aware of that kind of stuff.
Like,
So that can of worms scares me to open that.
like Roman was saying, does that require a special liquor license? I guess sometimes it doesn't because there's no
It
liquor,
all,
but it,
well, it depends. There is an optional premise license that Butte 66 holds on that property as well as the sprung structure area that they can turn on and off throughout the summer or even the winter, throughout the year.
Hmm.
And, that generally means that they're like throwing a larger event that could attract a lot more people. But I guess in that
Yeah,
instance,
does D cover it then? Has not been issued a special event liquor license or activated an optional premise liquor license?
well, that's what I'm wondering. So if we don't use the liquor licensing company and we say that private thing, how does that fall?
Well, it would be dependent on the facts of the event, right? I mean, if they're activating the optional premise license, then they're not tier 1 or tier 2, right? At this point.
Right.
Or special event liquor license, right? So if it's
Yeah.
day and they're out on the deck is part of their regular liquor license.
Yeah.
It's not
Yep.
special or optional.
so,
As long as council is cool with it, I do like Nick's suggestion of the primarily held completely indoors to keep some boundaries, for us to have.
I would also just remind you all that this is something that, like the e-bike program, we'll be bringing it back after the full year of it being implemented. So if there are issues, this document is a lot more fluid and easy to change than some sort of code amendment.
And also think, when we do look at this again, it would be helpful for my understanding of it to just maybe like in chart form to see the differences. I'm able to glean these by going through it. But maybe in chart form, you could see the differences as you progressed. Does that,
I like-
understand what I'm saying? Like the difference between 0, 1, 2, 3.
it's like when you sign up for
Bless
like,
you.
thank you, you know, a Netflix account, and it's like, this is Netflix basic, and this is Netflix premium.
Yeah, what you get in each one.
And we can do that. My plan was next meeting, first reading on the ordinance, and then the meeting that we have second reading, we also approve the guidelines as well via resolution, so it's all ready to go when the ordinance takes effect.
Council or Nick, anything else on these tiers that we'd like to go over? All right, hearing nothing. The application itself, really the only change to this application is now that the tier 1 event has been added as well to that top, to page 1 at the very top. Otherwise, the application remains the same.
I have a very, very critical piece of feedback,
Please.
and that is that on page 12, you have a typo, it's that you misspelled tier, TEIR at the very top of the page.
Page 12.
12 of the, sorry, of the
Oh,
council
of the
packet,
packet.
which is.
It's okay. I can find it.
It's the special events permit application.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, we were talking through. Yep, second bullet. Tier 2. That's all. It's in caps. The very first page of the application.
What page
Do you
is
see it?
it?
The very
Oh.
first page of the application,
Yeah.
second bullet. When you say tier 1 events, then you have in all caps must apply as a tier 2 event, just a typo.
Oh, thank you.
No
Yep,
problem.
I see it now.
6th grade spelling bee champion. Um, Yeah, the other thing, if a little nitpicky, but you talk about those hours in two different ways, and that's what kind of was confusing me. In one, when you're describing it in the tiers, you say outside of the hours of ten AM and seven PM, and ten AM, and in the application, you say, will there be outdoor amplified sound at the event between the hours of ten PM and seven AM? Maybe it'd just be clear if you put it one way or the other. Yeah.
I am hearing nothing else. So if that be the case, we can draw this work session to a close, Nicholas.
All right, well, let's make sure.
Since we do have some time, if anybody else wants to read a little more or follow up on anything you had, like before we take a break. Rolling. Okay. All right, nothing else then? All right, cool. Got about
So to
20 minutes.
wrap this, just to clear guidance for Nick and Rebecca, why don't we summarize the outcome here, just so we have it all tidied up for when we bring it into the council, especially since we have a few extra minutes.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Sure. So for that ordinance, I'm gonna add the kind of the insurance and indemnification language that I discussed. And after this, Carlos, we're gonna connect and just clarify what kind of interests the town has in different areas, let's say parking lots, what have you, and we'll nail down the language of what town owned or managed property or any property with a leasehold interest, whatever we end up developing. We are going to change the citation, or not the citation. We're going to change the reference to the special event coordinator in the ordinance to zoning administrator. And then for these tiers, we're going to change tier 1 to an event that is held primarily, or the event is held primarily, keep saying it. The event is primarily held completely indoors or at the Mountain Wedding Garden. Now, there's a few typos in the application to fix. Otherwise, that's all I have in my notes. Am I missing
And
something?
I also have to create a chart for the different tiers.
Yes.
And to align the outdoor amplified music verbiage between the two event tiers and application.
Yep.
That was all of the notes I had as well, Nick.
And we may need, depending on which chapter this goes in, to add a definition for zoning administrator to make sure it's known. what
Okay.
that-
My thought behind this also is maybe in the more general definition section of the code, without looking at it now, there may be a term to pull from there that maybe.
Yeah, it exists in other chapters, so it'd be very easy to pull from. I think if it's not in this chapter, though, it just needs to be included in the definition section of that chapter.
Yep, sounds good. Well, I mean, that's something we can look at between now and February.
And then I do have one more note. I'm gonna get with Nick on the days in those blanks on the ordinance.
Oh, well, now that I'm looking at it, it does look like we have other blanks that maybe the council should weigh in on. Appeal deadlines, I'm looking at page 7 of the packet, 11-73 subsection B. Left blanks for how long someone has to file an appeal and how long the town manager has to give, or how far out the town manager has to give notice of the hearing. I mean, usually that's, both of these are usually anywhere between 7 and 21 days. I don't think it really matters what the
For
number
that,
is.
Yes, I'd suggest on these days. You know, that's probably something we can look at some of the other processes the town has.
Yeah,
And that's on us. I think that's on us to make a suggestion.
okay.
Rather than figure out, okay, is it 10 days or 7 for this? Now, is it 6 or 8 for that?
Well, probably
council-
what I'll do then is pull from the STR code that we set up that appeals process for last year and just keep it at that.
Let's just make a recommendation.
Sure.
And then council's got something to look at.
All right.
Rebecca, when you were talking with the special events folks, and I'm not asking for anyone in particular, but was there anything you got pushback on or that folks didn't like about this new tier system or the new version of the tier system?
Let me pull up my notes. Not that I remember, it was mostly positive feedback that I received. From them. No negative feedback or no like real pushback on anything. I mean, to be honest, this is making it so much easier on everybody that everybody was super receptive of it. Because basically we were treating every single event that comes through this town like a tier 4 event. And it's taxing on those smaller events, you know, and so I think that this really was like, wow, you finally listened to us and are doing something about it kind of response.
Were you getting any consistent questions?
Mostly on liquor permitting stuff, which we've cleared up since with them. But otherwise, not really.
And you feel like that there's enough description in here to alleviate the questions coming to you on liquor permitting?
So, I mean, to be honest, when it's, and even in this meeting with the event coordinators, I don't answer liquor permitting questions. That's not my world, that's Tiffany's world. And so I always defer them to them unless it's very simple and it's like stated in her application that I can speak to. But if it's a question I can't answer, I always defer to her, and that's why they weren't answered in that meeting as well, because I brought them to her instead.
And those rules those laws actually come from the state
Yeah,
Okay,
regarding
Okay.
liquor permitting. Who needs a special event liquor license, who doesn't? That's all directed by state code.
okay. And they have access to that when they're reviewing this?
yes, you just don't have access to those links right now because I couldn't get them to be ADA compliant. But they will be on the application.
Okay, great.
But you'll see on the application, there's different highlighted things that look like they're links. Those are all your links to that information.
Anything, I mean, I know we'll get to it when we actually have some of these events before us, but anything new event wise coming down the pipe?
Nothing new. Unfortunately, inflation has really hurt our industry quite a bit. And there'll be, unfortunately, some events are actually coming to be saying they're not coming back this year because of different reasons. And so, I'm hopeful that we might see some new stuff with this new ad tax round. Because we don't always hear about every applicant. Hopefully they read the guidelines now and know that they need to contact Marissa. But every once in, like every ad tax round, I'm always surprised by, oh, well, there's 2 new events for this summer. And so that will really start to come in the next couple of weeks, but, I did get notice, today from the Outer Bike guys that they won't be back this year. Yeah, it was a real bummer.
I saw you missing color off that honey.
I know. Well,
I figured it was gonna be
that's
one of
what
them.
Outright was saying. So what Outright said was that the industry's really hurting right now, and that demos just really aren't a thing right now. People bought bikes during COVID, everyone's taking a big hit. They've got overstock of last year's inventory, and it's not something they're willing to pay to come demo out again. And so Outer Bike's backing, they usually do 5 across the country, and they're doing 2 this year in hopes that they can retain some reserve funds to be able to bring it back to at least this location as a 3rd location, since they're so close at being in Moab. And so for 2026, they're hopeful that they'll be back, but they've got to bow out of 2025. Colorado 500 has connected, they were at that meeting as well, that we hosted. And while they will be back, they are not hosting out of here this year. They're hosting out of, I'm gonna say it wrong, Uray? Did I say it right?
said it right.
They are hosting out of there and then, I'm sorry, no, they are hosting out of Snowmass and then going to Uray and to here as their travels this year instead of home basing here and traveling to those 2 others.
Did they set any inspiration for that? Make a couple guesses.
Did they send me inspiration?
Did they show any reason for their shift in route this year?
You know, they didn't really give any reasoning. I honestly, I didn't ask.
That used to
Because
be
I was
more,
kind of
they used to be more the way they did it, I think, that they did move around more, and then they sort of, they settled into here for a
Yeah.
while, so I think it's probably just them changing it up a little bit.
Yeah, or it's parking. You know, and I know that even though we're always able to accommodate it. And not only just us, the town, but CDMR as well. I know it's always a very hot point with her. And she always comes into it anxious, feeling like she doesn't have enough. From my experience with her, and so I can see that being. If she found somewhere that has easier parking, but I'm happy to inquire.
No, I was just curious. I kind of thought some of the parking stuff last summer, I remember her being, having some concerns.
Yeah,
More vocal
yeah.
than previous
And
years.
but once it was over and done with, they were really happy with the way that it was, and they do plan to do. A parking lot party while they're here, like they did last year, on the same terms with the liquor. They're trying to figure out whether they're gonna have CDMR just throw it and under their liquor license, or if they're gonna apply for the special event like they did last year. But we had 0 issues or complaints with them last year, no codes broken, and so I've really taken it as a hands-off approach now, as long as they cross their Ts and dot their Is while they're there.
You mentioned inflation affecting the industry, is that like across the board or?
Yeah,
Like
you know,
inflation here?
no, across the board, the industry is really seeing it everywhere. Those kind of events that were barely getting over that line are now just making that line, if making that line. And so a lot of companies and event organizers are reassessing their need for these larger events and these destination events. And so, food and beverage is definitely the highest of most people's, the sound production, talent hiring, it's all not far behind. I was just trying to explain to the TCCA, you know, that band that you could hire for $8,500 2 years ago is now a $15,000 band, and they haven't gotten any better. Right, and so like, unfortunately, and so now, like, if you want that next level, you've got to put $20,000 at it instead of 8, you know, and it's just kind of the way that it's trickling down from everybody's livable
Yeah,
expenses going up, you know? So, I feel very, very lucky to be an organizer for the town and not for a private entity because of that, so.
all right. Well, anything else on this topic? Nick?
No, it sounds like I'll be wishing you guys a good night. Don't have too much fun with Jerry without me there. Hope everyone has a nice evening and nice seeing everyone virtually, and I'll be seeing you in person soon.
As soon as you sign off, we're bringing out the real food.
Yeah, don't tell me
There's-
secret stash is on the way.
Thanks, Nick.
All right, you sit in, yes.
Yeah.
Have a good night.